What if I told you that Britain didn't lose its empire because of war? What if the bombs, the Blitz, and the battlefields weren't the real reason the British Empire collapsed? Because in 1945, Britain technically won World War II. Its flag still flew over a quarter of the globe. Its navy still ruled the seas. Its politicians still spoke as if empire would last forever. And yet within just 2 decades that empire vanished. India gone, Africa unraveling, the pound humiliated, Britain forced to beg again and again for financial rescue. So what really happened? The answer isn't found in trenches or tanks, but in contracts, loans, exchange rates, and a quiet financial bill that Britain was never supposed to escape. A bill written not in public speeches but in fine print. Tonight, we're uncovering how the United States quietly bankrupted the British Empire after World War II, not with guns, but with money. And once you see how it happened, you'll start noticing the same pattern playing out today. To understand the collapse, we have to rewind. Before World War II, Britain wasn't just a country, it was the global system. London was the financial capital of the world. The British pound was the global reserve currency. Trade, insurance, shipping, banking, almost all of it ran through Britain. But there was a hidden weakness. The British Empire was already financially overstretched. World War I had drained Britain's gold reserves. The empire survived the 1920s and 30s by borrowing, selling assets, and slowly losing ground to a rising challenger across the Atlantic, the United States. By the late 1930s, the US held most of the world's gold. Its industrial capacity dwarfed Europe, and unlike Britain, America was a creditor, not a debtor. Britain entered World War II with courage, experience, and prestige, but without money, and that would change everything. When war broke out in 1939, Britain faced an impossible problem. It needed weapons, ships, planes, food, oil, and it needed them fast. At first Britain paid cash selling gold, overseas investments, even buildings in New York. But by 1940, Britain was nearly broke. That's when the US stepped in not as a charity, but as a creditor. Enter Lend-Lease. America would lend Britain weapons and supplies on the condition that Britain would dismantle trade barriers after the war, open its imperial markets, and accept a new American-led financial order. During the war, this deal looked like salvation. But buried inside it was a trap. Because Lend-Lease wasn't free and it wasn't permanent. It was leverage, and the bill was coming due. As the war was ending, US planners were already thinking ahead. They didn't want another Great Depression. They didn't want old empires controlling trade. And they certainly didn't want Britain restoring its pre-war dominance. So America designed a new system. In 1944, delegates met at Bretton Woods. The result, the US dollar, became the world's reserve currency. Global trade would be dollar-based, and currencies including the British pound would be tied to the dollar on paper. This was cooperation. In reality, it was a transfer of power. Britain agreed because it had no choice. Its economy was exhausted, its cities destroyed, its gold reserves gone. And then came the moment that sealed Britain's fate. In 1945, the war ended, and the US abruptly ended Lend-Lease. No warning, no transition. Britain was left with massive obligations, and no dollars to pay them. That's when Britain made the request that would haunt it for decades. In 1946, Britain asked the United States for a loan. The result was the Anglo-American loan agreement. On the surface, $3.75 billion loan. Low interest, long repayment period, but hidden inside were conditions that shattered the empire. First, Britain had to make the pound fully convertible to dollars. That meant anyone could exchange pounds for scarce US dollars. This was catastrophic. Within weeks, Britain's dollar reserves collapsed. Speculators attacked the pound. The Bank of England panicked. Convertibility was suspended, but the damage was done. Second, Britain had to abandon imperial trade preferences. For decades, the empire functioned as a protected economic zone. Now it was forced open to American goods, American capital, American influence. Britain lost its economic control over its colonies, without firing a single shot. And third, Britain was now officially a debtor nation to the United States. The empire wasn't conquered, it was foreclosed. The consequences came fast. Britain could no longer afford large military deployments, imperial administration, or economic subsidies to colonies. Independence movements surged. India, once the crown jewel, was gone by 1947. Africa followed. The Middle East slipped away. And Britain faced repeated humiliations, none greater than the Suez Crisis of 1956. When Britain tried to act like a superpower, the United States shut it down financially. No dollars, no support, no empire. The message was clear. Britain was no longer in charge. Britain tried everything: austerity, devaluations, welfare reforms, industrial nationalization. Nothing restored imperial power. The fundamental problem remained: Britain owed money, America controlled the system. And the pound was no longer king. The loan payments dragged on until 2006. Yes, Britain was still paying for World War II 60 years later. The empire was gone long before the final check cleared. Now here's where this stops being history and starts being uncomfortable today. The US dollar still dominates global trade. Debt determines power, and financial systems decide winners and losers. Countries don't fall to invasion anymore. They fall to debt traps, currency crises, conditional loans, and financial leverage. Sound familiar? The British Empire wasn't destroyed by tanks, it was dismantled by terms and conditions. So what can we learn? Takeaway number 1. Military victory doesn't guarantee economic survival. Takeaway number 2. Whoever controls the financial system controls the future. Takeaway number 3. Empires don't collapse overnight, they collapse through contracts. And the warning: every global power believes it's immune, until the bill arrives. Britain never saw it coming. The empire didn't fall in flames, it faded in spreadsheets. So here's the question we'll leave you with. When history looks back on our era, who will they say was quietly paying the bill? If you value deep hidden history breakdowns like this, subscribe, like the video, and comment. Empires fall quietly, because the most dangerous collapses are the ones you don't notice until it's already over.